Li Wei knew he was going to die. The bridge ahead was blocked by a mountain of wrecked vehicles. A burning fuel tanker split the bridge in two, sending black smoke into the gray sky. Behind him, the infected poured down the ruined avenue. 5 years of surviving the apocalypse had taught him one thing. Some roads were dangerous. Some roads were dead. This one was dead. There was nowhere left to run. Li Wei drew a rifle from a space. 23 rounds. He fired with practiced precision. Every bullet found its mark. One infected, then another, then another. The runners fell, but the horde never slowed. The rifle disappeared. A spear appeared. He met the first wave head-on. The spear pierced skull after skull before giving way to an axe. Each weapon appeared with a single thought. Li Wei fought exactly as he had for the past 5 years. Calm, efficient, relentless. His injured knee finally gave way. His breathing became ragged. Then sharp pain exploded through his left arm. An infected had bitten him. Li Wei glanced at the wound. Too deep, too high. There would be no escaping the infection. He laughed softly. So this is how it ends. The axe rose once more. If he was going to die, he would take as many with him as possible. Minutes later, the infected overwhelmed him and dragged him to the ground. Their weight crushed the air from his lungs. Teeth tore into his shoulders, his chest, his side. His vision darkened. For the last time, Li Wei looked toward the gray sky. Then, everything disappeared. Someone touched his arm. Li Wei's eyes snapped open. Without thinking, he grabbed the person's wrist, twisted, and threw them across the room. A startled cry rang out. Li Wei immediately sat upright. There was no bridge, no smoke, no infected. Only a small farmhouse built from mud bricks and timber. A teenage boy stared at him from the floor, clutching his wrist in shock. Before Li Wei could react, the wooden door flew open. Several people rushed inside. A thin woman, a weathered middle-aged man, a broad-shouldered young farmer, a pregnant young woman, a little girl peeking timidly from behind the doorway. Where? The woman rushed toward him. Instinct took over. Li Wei grabbed the farming hoe resting beside the bed and raised it between them. The room fell silent. Then, a sharp pain pierced his head. Fragments of another life flooded his mind. A poor farming family. Willowbrook Village. A leaking roof. Long days working the fields. Empty grain jars. A fever that refused to break. The original owner of this body had died during the night. The hoe slipped from Li Wei's fingers. It hit the floor with a dull thud. His mother threw her arms around him. His father let out a shaky breath. The younger boy smiled, despite the pain in his wrist. The little girl burst into tears. They had believed they had lost him. After making sure his fever had truly broken, the family reluctantly left him alone to rest. Silence returned to the room. Li Wei slowly closed his eyes. One thought filled his mind. The space. Would it still be there? He reached for it. The connection formed instantly. Relief washed over him. The endless fields remained untouched. The orchards were still full. The reservoirs shimmered beneath the sunlight. Barns housed healthy livestock. Warehouse after warehouse remained packed with grain, seeds, medicine, tools, fuel, clothing, and every supply he had collected during 5 years in the apocalypse. Everything had come with him. As he inspected the space, something caught his attention. A bloodstained combat knife lay beside the chicken coop. It was the weapon he had stored away during his final battle. Without hesitation, Li Wei moved it into an empty metal container far away from the fields and livestock. Only then did he withdraw from the space. He never noticed the tiny smear of dried blood left behind where a curious hen had pecked at the handle. Back in the farmhouse, exhaustion crashed over him. The original owner's lingering fever, the battle, the transmigration, and the flood of unfamiliar memories had pushed both his body and mind to their limits. His eyelids grew heavy. Within moments, he fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. Morning sunlight spilled through the paper window. By the time Li Wei stepped into the main room, breakfast was already waiting. Each person had a bowl of thin millet porridge and a single hard millet cake. There was nothing else. Li Wei took a bite. The coarse cake was dry enough that he needed 2 mouthfuls of porridge to swallow it. No one complained. Looking around the table, he understood why. For this family, simply having breakfast was a blessing. After the meal, everyone returned to their daily work. Guided by the original Li Wei's memories, he set out toward the family fields. Before reaching them, he spotted Malin walking toward the mountain with Li Jun and little Li Lan. Each carried a woven basket. Second brother, Li Jun waved excitedly. Li Wei smiled faintly. "Where are you three going?" "The mountain," Malin replied. "We're going to gather wild vegetables. If we're lucky, we'll find some mushrooms." Li Wei glanced at their nearly empty baskets before taking the largest one from her hands. "I'll come." The four climbed the mountain together. Most of the journey passed in comfortable silence. Li Wei walked a few steps behind, quietly observing the unfamiliar world around him. Once they reached the gathering grounds, everyone spread out. Li Jun searched beneath bushes. "Maybe we'll catch a rabbit today. We haven't eaten meat in several days." Little Li Lan happily followed behind him. Malin knelt among the grasses, carefully digging edible greens from the soil. Li Wei joined her. Years of surviving in the wilderness had taught him far more than farming. He recognized wild amaranth, shepherd's purse, dandelion greens, fern shoots, bamboo shoots, edible mushrooms, wild onions, mountain berries, and medicinal herbs hidden beneath the undergrowth. Whenever Malin wasn't looking, he quietly sent one root, one seed, or one young plant of every new discovery into the space. One day, his family would never need to climb these mountains searching for food again. By the time the morning sun climbed above the treetops, their baskets were nearly full. Before heading home, they gathered fallen branches and bundles of dry firewood. Nothing on the mountain was wasted. Every branch meant another meal could be cooked. With baskets full and firewood on their backs, the four began the walk back toward Willowbrook Village. By the time Li Wei, Malin, Li Jun, and Li Lan returned from the mountain, the sun was already high above Willowbrook Village. They carried their baskets into the courtyard and set them beside the kitchen. Malin immediately began sorting the vegetables for lunch. The tender greens were placed in one pile, the mushrooms in another, while the older leaves and damaged roots were set aside for the chickens. Li Jun and Li Lan carried the dry branches they had gathered to the woodpile. Li Wei watched them for a moment before returning to his room. Once the door was closed, he entered the space. The plants he had collected from the mountain were still resting on the dark soil where he had left them. He quickly planted the wild onions, edible greens, berry roots, and medicinal herbs in separate areas. The mushrooms were placed beneath damp logs near the reservoir, where the soil remained cool and shaded. After watering everything, he harvested a few crops that had already matured and checked the livestock. The chickens were healthy and multiplying quickly. Several hens were sitting on fresh eggs. Li Wei paused beside the coop. The space accelerated the growth of everything living inside it. If he left the eggs alone for too long, they would hatch. That meant if he wanted eggs to eat, he needed to collect them regularly. He made a mental note before continuing through the space. By the time he returned to his room, voices were coming from the courtyard. His parents and older brother had already returned from the fields, and Malin was serving lunch. Li Wei joined the family at the table. The meal consisted of thin millet porridge, boiled wild vegetables, and the same coarse grain cakes they had eaten that morning. The wild vegetables had been cooked with little more than water and salt. They were not unpleasant, but they were nearly tasteless. Li Wei finished his portion and immediately understood that it would not be enough. His stomach was barely 1/3 full. During the apocalypse, even on difficult days, the space had allowed him to eat until he was comfortably satisfied. He did not always eat his fill, but he had rarely been forced to stop while still hungry. The family around him seemed accustomed to it. His father drank the last of his porridge and said nothing. His mother broke off part of her grain cake and placed it into Li Lan's bowl. Malin ate slowly, making her small portion last longer. Even Li Jun, who had been excited all morning, did not ask for more. They were not eating until they were satisfied. They were eating enough to keep working. Li Wei lowered his eyes to his empty bowl. He could not continue hiding everything in the space while his family lived like this. He would need to start bringing food out, carefully, a little at a time, enough to improve their meals without attracting attention. After lunch, his father and older brother returned to the fields. His mother left with them, carrying drinking water and a bundle of repaired clothing. Li Jun and Li Lan soon curled up for their afternoon nap. Malin gathered the dirty clothes and headed toward the river. With the house quiet, Li Wei decided to walk around the village. Li Wei. An elderly man repairing a bamboo fence looked up as Li Wei passed. "Your fever finally broke?" Li Wei nodded. "I'm feeling much better. You frightened your family." The old man shook his head. "Your mother barely slept." A woman carrying a water bucket stopped nearby. "You should be resting, not wandering around." "I've already rested enough," Li Wei replied. The woman smiled. "That sounds more like you." Li Wei exchanged a few more greetings as he continued through the village. The houses were simple, most built from mud bricks, timber, and thatched roofs. Chickens wandered freely through the narrow paths. Children played beside the well, while several older women sat beneath a tree, repairing baskets and discussing the harvest. The village appeared peaceful. Poor but peaceful. Li Wei had not walked far before his stomach began to ache with hunger again. He pressed a hand against it and looked toward the mountain. The watery porridge had done little more than quiet his hunger for a short while. He turned away from the village center and headed toward the trees. Once he was far enough from the main path, he climbed around the side of the mountain until the village disappeared from view. He checked the area carefully. There was no one nearby. With a thought, he reached into the space. He first collected several fresh eggs. Then he returned to the chicken enclosure. The flock had grown quickly over the years, and removing one bird would make no noticeable difference. Li Wei selected a plump hen and carried it away from the others. If anyone asked, he could claim it was a wild chicken caught on a mountain. It was not a perfect explanation, but wild birds were sometimes found in the forest. He moved on to the storage area. From one of the warehouses, he took a small sack of polished rice. Not too much, enough for several meals, but not enough to look unreasonable if someone discovered it. He also took garlic, ginger, salt, dried mushrooms, cooking wine, a few spices, and a small amount of oil. After thinking for a moment, he added a little soy sauce and several spring onions. He packed everything into a rough woven sack before leaving the space. The polished rice and seasonings would be difficult to explain, but Li Wei had already decided not to invent a detailed lie. For now, he only needed to feed the family. He returned to the village by a less-used path. The courtyard was empty when he arrived. His parents and older brother were still in the fields. Li Jun and Li Lan had apparently woken and gone outside. Malin had not returned from the river. Li Wei carried everything into the kitchen and immediately began working. He cleaned the chicken first, saving the feathers and unwanted parts so the discovery would appear more believable. The bird was cut into pieces and placed in a clay pot with ginger, garlic, mushrooms, cooking wine, and a small amount of seasoning. He added water and left it to simmer slowly. The rice was washed and placed over the second stove. He then prepared the wild vegetables they had gathered that morning, stir-frying them with garlic and salt. The kitchen soon filled with the smell of cooking meat. Li Wei had not realized how much he had missed it. After tasting the chicken broth, he added another pinch of salt and covered the pot again. By the time the food was ready, the rice was soft and fragrant, the chicken tender, and the vegetables far better than anything the family had eaten since his arrival. He placed the dishes on the table, cleaned the kitchen, and returned to his room. He had barely sat down when he heard footsteps in the courtyard. Malin had returned. She was carrying an empty washing basket and thinking about what she could prepare for dinner when she suddenly stopped. A rich aroma drifted from the house. She looked toward the neighboring courtyard. Had someone nearby cooked chicken? The smell was unusually strong. Then she realized it was coming from her own kitchen. Malin stood still for several seconds. She stepped inside cautiously and stared at the table. A full pot of white rice rested beside a clay pot of chicken and mushrooms. The wild vegetables had also been cooked, but they were bright and fragrant rather than pale and watery. Malin pinched the inside of her arm. The sharp pain made her gasp. It was not a dream. Her surprise lasted only a moment before fear struck her. The rice. She rushed toward the grain storage. Had someone used everything they had left? She lifted the lid and looked inside. The family's millet and coarse grain were still there. More surprisingly, a small amount of white rice had been added to the storage jar. Malin released the breath she had been holding. At least the family's food had not been used up, but that only created another question. Where had the white rice come from? And the chicken? And the seasonings? She looked toward Li Wei's closed door. Before she could decide whether to knock, voices sounded outside. The rest of the family had returned. Li Lan entered first. She took 2 steps into the courtyard before stopping. Chicken. Li Jun ran past her. Where? Their mother and father entered behind them, followed by Li Han. The smell led everyone directly into the kitchen. For a moment, no one spoke. White rice was something the family rarely ate. Chicken was even rarer. Together, the dishes looked like a festival meal. Li Wei heard their voices and came out of his room. His mother turned immediately. Where? Her eyes moved between him and the food. Where did all this come from? His father's expression was more serious. You went out this afternoon. Li Wei nodded. I did. Did someone give this to you? Li Han asked. Li Wei considered lying. He could say he had found money. He could say a traveler had paid him for help. He could claim he had caught the chicken and traded something for the rice. Every lie would lead to more questions. I can't explain everything yet, he said. His mother frowned. What does that mean? It means I need a little time. Where? I didn't steal it, Li Wei said firmly. I didn't rob anyone, and I didn't do anything illegal. His father watched him closely. Then why can't you tell us? Li Wei remained silent. Before his father could continue, Li Jun tugged at his mother's sleeve. Mother, can we eat first? Li Lan nodded quickly. The food will get cold. Their mother looked at the 2 children, then back at Li Wei. He pressed a hand against his stomach and leaned slightly against the wall. I'm still weak from the fever, he said, and I haven't eaten enough today. It was not entirely an act. He was genuinely hungry, but he exaggerated the weakness just enough for his mother's expression to change. She immediately stepped toward him. Are you dizzy? A little. Sit down. His father was clearly unconvinced, but he did not stop them. We will discuss this later. Li Wei nodded. The family took their seats. For the first few moments, everyone stared at the meal. Then Li Lan took her first bite of rice. Her eyes widened. It's soft. Li Jun had already reached for the chicken. Their mother slapped the back of his hand lightly. Wait for your father. Once the bowls were filled, the family began eating. Conversation quickly disappeared. The chicken was tender, the broth rich with mushrooms and ginger. The rice absorbed the sauce, while the garlic gave the vegetables a flavor they had never had before. Li Jun ate so quickly that his mother had to remind him to chew. Li Lan held a small piece of chicken in both hands and carefully picked every bit of meat from the bone. Malin placed the best pieces into the children's bowls. Their mother moved one back into Malin's bowl. You're carrying a child. Eat. Malin tried to refuse, but the older woman ignored her. Li Han quietly added another piece to his wife's bowl. Their father ate more slowly than everyone else, but Li Wei noticed that he went back for a second serving of rice. No one finished the meal hungry. By the end, even the children's bowls were empty. Li Jun leaned back and rubbed his stomach. I'm full. The words made the room go quiet for a moment. It had been a long time since any of them had been able to say that. Li Wei looked around the table. His mother appeared less tired. Malin's face had regained some color. The younger children were smiling. Even his father's stern expression had softened. Whatever questions came later, Li Wei did not regret the meal. That night, after the family went to sleep, Li Wei returned to the space. He collected the remaining eggs before they could hatch, separated several hens for future use, and checked the seedlings he had planted earlier. Some had already taken root. The mushrooms had begun spreading along the damp logs. The berry bushes appeared stronger than they had that morning. Li Wei walked through the familiar fields, thinking about the family outside. He had enough food to feed them for years. Enough medicine to treat illnesses that might otherwise kill them. Enough seeds, tools, and supplies to change their lives completely. The difficulty would be deciding how quickly to reveal it. Too much at once would frighten them. It could also attract outsiders. He needed a believable explanation, something his family could accept, something that would not place them in danger. Still thinking, Li Wei returned to his room and lay down. He did not remember closing his eyes. One moment he was staring at the dark wooden beams above him. The next, he was standing in the middle of Willowbrook Village. Smoke covered the sky. The quiet houses were burning. Screams echoed through the narrow roads. Li Wei turned sharply. Infected poured into the village from every direction. They climbed over fences, smashed through wooden doors, and dragged villagers from their homes. Li Jun ran toward him. Second brother. Li Lan was crying beside him. Mei Lin tried to protect them, but infected surrounded her before Li Wei could reach them. She disappeared beneath the horde. Li Han shouted her name and charged forward. He never returned. Li Wei tried to move, but the road between them filled with infected. His father grabbed a farming hoe. "Take them and run." The older man stepped into the road alone. Li Wei shouted for him to stop. His father did not look back. The horde swallowed him. Li Wei grabbed his mother and the two children. They ran toward the mountain. The infected followed. No matter how fast they moved, the distance continued shrinking. His mother stumbled. Li Jun screamed. Li Lan's hand slipped from his. Li Wei turned and saw thousands of infected behind them. He had weapons, food, the space, everything he had relied on during the apocalypse. Yet none of it was enough to protect them all. The horde reached his family. Li Wei woke with a violent gasp. He sat upright in bed. Cold sweat covered his face and neck. His hands were shaking. The room was dark and silent. Across from him, Li Jun slept peacefully. Outside, insects chirped beneath the night sky. There were no screams, no burning houses, no infected, only a dream. Li Wei lay back down, but his heartbeat refused to slow. The dream had felt too real. He stared into the darkness, unable to shake the image of his family being surrounded. He had survived the end of one world. Now, for reasons he could not explain, he could not stop feeling that disaster had followed him into this one. Li Wei woke before sunrise. The nightmare had ended hours ago, but the uneasiness it left behind remained. His nerves felt stretched tight. Every small sound outside the farmhouse caught his attention. The rustling trees, the distant bark of a dog, the shifting steps of an animal in the courtyard. Nothing was wrong. At least, nothing he could identify. Perhaps it was only the dream. Perhaps the memories of the apocalypse were finally catching up with him. Or perhaps, Li Wei pushed the thought away and sat up. Since he was already awake, there was no reason to remain in bed. The kitchen was cold and silent when he entered. He lit the stove, then took several eggs and a small amount of rice from the space. He did not touch the white rice he had added to the family's grain jar the previous day. That rice needed to remain there, so no one would question why the jar was suddenly empty again. He cooked a thick rice porridge with finely chopped vegetables, mushrooms, and small pieces of preserved meat from the space. The meat was added sparingly, just enough to give the porridge flavor without making the meal look excessive. He boiled several eggs and seasoned a plate of vegetables with garlic and a little oil. By the time the rest of the family woke, breakfast was ready. His mother entered the kitchen first and stopped when she saw the table. "You cooked again?" "I woke early." She looked at the porridge, then at him. Li Wei knew she still wanted answers about the food from the previous night, but she said nothing. The family gathered around the table soon afterward. The porridge was thick enough to satisfy the stomach, and every person received an egg. Li Jun peeled as carefully, as though afraid it might disappear. Li Lan took small bites, saving the yolk for last. Even his father accepted a second bowl of porridge. Li Wei ate with them, but his attention kept drifting toward the window. The morning was peaceful, too peaceful. He could not explain why that bothered him. After breakfast, Mei Lin prepared the gathering baskets. Li Jun and Li Lan hurried to join her. "We're going back to the mountain," Li Jun announced. "There should still be mushrooms near the northern slope." Li Wei stood. "I'll come." The four left the village as sunlight spread across the fields. As usual, Li Wei walked a few steps behind them. Mei Lin spoke softly to the children while Li Jun searched the roadside for animal tracks. Li Lan carried the smallest basket and stopped whenever she saw flowers. Li Wei barely heard them. The feeling from the nightmare had followed him. It sat heavily in his chest, warning him of something he could neither see nor name. By the time he pulled himself from his thoughts, they were already halfway up the mountain. They stopped near the same gathering area they had used the day before. Mei Lin began collecting wild greens while the younger children searched around the trees. Li Wei looked toward the deeper forest. I'm going farther up. Malin straightened. Don't go too far. There are wild animals deeper in the mountain. I'll be careful. He left them before she could say more. The trees grew denser as he climbed. The village sounds disappeared, replaced by birds, insects, and the occasional movement of something hidden beneath the brush. Li Wei moved quietly. 5 years in the apocalypse had taught him how to walk without disturbing the forest. Not far from the path, a rabbit darted from beneath a bush. Instead of stopping it immediately, Li Wei chased after it. The rabbit darted through the underbrush, weaving between trees and low branches. Li Wei followed closely, his movements quick but controlled. The terrain grew rougher before the rabbit suddenly disappeared beneath a tangled mass of exposed roots. A burrow. Li Wei slowed and crouched nearby. Fresh tracks surrounded the entrance, and the loose soil had been disturbed recently. More than one rabbit lived here. He picked up a fallen branch and tested an idea that had just occurred to him. Carefully, he extended the branch toward the entrance of the burrow before focusing his mind. The moment the tip touched the opening, the branch vanished. Li Wei's eyes narrowed slightly. So it worked. As long as something was connected to an object he was holding, he could send it into the space. A useful discovery. He glanced at the burrow one last time. The rabbits weren't going anywhere. Once he figured out a better method, he could come back and move the entire family into the space instead of chasing them through the forest. Leaving the burrow behind, Li Wei continued deeper into the mountain. Under a patch of dry leaves, he found several walnuts. They were small and easy to miss, likely overlooked by previous gatherers. He brushed away the leaves and collected every one of them. Farther ahead, several wild fruits had already fallen from the trees. Most had already begun to rot. Ordinary villagers would have ignored them. Li Wei picked them up anyway. As long as the seeds remained alive, the space could grow them into healthy trees. That was all he needed. He continued searching. Along the way, he found several unfamiliar seeds scattered among the brush. He didn't recognize them, but that didn't matter. If they could grow, the space would eventually tell him exactly what they were. After storing them away, Li Wei continued deeper into the forest. A sudden burst of wings erupted from the bushes ahead. Several large birds shot into the air. Li Wei reacted instantly. With a thought, 2 of them disappeared into the space before the rest escaped into the trees. He checked them through his awareness. Wild pheasants. A faint smile appeared on Li Wei's face. Today's harvest was turning out better than expected. Heavy footsteps struck the ground. A wild boar pushed through the brush. It was not fully grown, but it was large enough to injure a man. The animal lowered its head and charged. Li Wei waited. 10 steps. 5. The moment it came within reach, he sent it into the space. The boar vanished so suddenly that several disturbed leaves continued moving where it had been. Li Wei exhaled. That had been easier than hunting. He searched the surrounding area and found fresh tracks from at least 2 more boars. He followed them for a short distance, but stopped when the terrain became steep. There was no need to take unnecessary risks. He already had rabbits, pheasants, and 1 young boar. More could wait. By the time he returned to the lower slope, the sun had passed its highest point and had begun its slow descent. It was already mid-afternoon. Malin and the children had left the mountain. Li Wei followed the familiar trail home. When he arrived, a covered bowl had been left for him on the table. Lunch consisted of coarse brown rice mixed with a smaller amount of white rice, scrambled eggs with tomatoes, and wild vegetables on the side. There was less oil than Li Wei would normally use, but the food was far better than what he had eaten on his first day. He finished everything. Afterward, he washed away the sweat and dust with cool water before returning to his room. He entered the space and sorted the morning's discoveries. The rabbit pair was moved into an empty enclosure. The pheasants were placed in another fenced section. The young boar required more care. Li Wei reinforced one of the unused pens before releasing it inside. He planted the wild grapes, walnuts, hazelnuts, plums, and pears, then stored the remaining seeds for later. Once everything was settled, exhaustion caught up with him. Li Wei lay down and soon fell asleep. When he woke, movement came from the kitchen. Malin was preparing dinner. Li Wei sat up, listening for a moment. Taking out another chicken would be too much. The family had already eaten chicken the night before and eggs that morning. Even most fortunate hunter would not find meat every day. Eggs and vegetables were easier to explain. He entered the space and gathered another small basket of eggs. He also took several tomatoes, green onions, mushrooms, a cucumber, and a handful of fresh leafy vegetables. Malin looked up when he entered the kitchen, carrying them. Her eyes moved immediately to the eggs. More. Li Wei set everything on the table. Cook them for dinner. She examined the vegetables. They were larger and fresher than anything gathered on the mountain. Where did you get these? I'll explain soon. Malin frowned. You said that yesterday. I know. He lowered his voice. Use more of the white rice tonight. Tomorrow, I'll bring more. Her expression became even more doubtful. Li Wei gave her a reassuring smile. There will be enough. Malin looked toward the grain room, then back at him. In the end, she mixed some of the white rice with the family's coarse brown grain rather than cooking it alone. The eggs were scrambled with tomatoes and green onions. She cooked the mushrooms with garlic, made a cucumber dish with vinegar, and stir-fried the leafy vegetables. It would be another satisfying meal. While Malin worked, Li Wei picked up the water buckets. I'll fetch water. The village well was not far from the house. As Li Wei approached it, he saw the village leader speaking with two farmers. Li Wei, Chun Chang called. You look better. My fever has broken. That's good. Your family is worried enough. Before Li Wei could continue, a woman came running down the road. Village leader. Her hair had come loose, and her face was wet with tears. Please, lend me your bicycle. I need to take my eldest son to town. His fever is getting worse. Chun Chang caught her shoulders before she stumbled. Calm down. When did the fever begin? Last night. He can barely wake now. Let me see him first. If it's serious, we'll take him to town. The woman nodded desperately and led him away. Li Wei remained beside the well. Something inside his chest tightened. The uneasy feeling that had followed him all day suddenly sharpened. He tried to ignore it. A fever was common. He had awakened in this world after suffering from one himself. Yet his feet moved before he made a decision. Li Wei followed them. The woman's home stood near the outer edge of the village. It was poorer than the Li family's house, though still clean and carefully maintained. The moment Li Wei stepped into the courtyard, he smelled it. Sweat, sickness, and beneath it, something faint but familiar. His blood turned cold. The woman led Chun Chang into a small room. Her eldest son lay on a narrow bed. He appeared to be around 20. His face was pale, but his cheeks and forehead were covered in feverish sweat. His breathing came unevenly, sometimes too fast, and then almost stopping. Chun Chang placed a hand against his forehead. He's burning. Li Wei remained near the doorway. The young man's fingers twitched. His jaw tightened. A faint gray color had begun spreading beneath his skin. Li Wei had seen those signs before. Hundreds of times. No, thousands. Chun Chang checked the young man's pulse and examined his throat. I'll prepare something to lower the fever, he told the mother. If it doesn't improve, we'll take him to town. He stood and moved toward the door. Li Wei did not move. The young man's eyelids fluttered. Li Wei stepped closer and pulled one open. The eye was bloodshot. The pupil barely reacted. Thin red lines spread across the white of the eye. There was no mistaking it. This man was infected. Li Wei released him and forced himself to step back. His breathing remained steady, but every instinct inside him screamed. Somehow, the infection had crossed worlds with him. Li Wei followed Chun Chang from the house. He waited until they were far enough away that the sick man's mother could not hear. Village leader. Chun Chang stopped. What is it? That man needs to be killed. Chun Chang stared at him. Li Wei continued before the older man could interrupt. He will stop breathing soon. After that, he will wake again. What nonsense are you speaking? He won't be human when he wakes. He'll attack anyone nearby. He'll bite them, and they will become the same. Chun Chang's expression twisted. He grabbed Li Wei by the front of his shirt. Listen carefully. Li Wei did not resist. If you don't want to be reported and sent to a labor camp, you will never say anything like that again. I'm trying to warn you. You are talking about killing a sick man. Chun Chang, shove him away. Your fever must have damaged your mind. He turned and left. Li Wei stood alone on the road. The pressure inside his chest became unbearable. The sick man could turn within hours. If the village gathered to help, the infection would spread before anyone understood what was happening. Li Wei ran. He did not stop until he reached home. The family had gathered around the table and was about to begin eating. Everyone looked up when he entered. "We need to leave." His father frowned. "What?" "We need to leave the village tonight." Silence filled the room. His mother stood immediately. "Waiter, what happened?" "Finish eating, then gather anything valuable. Food, clothes, tools, anything we can carry." Li Han stared at him. "Where are we going?" "The mountain." Malin looked toward the darkening sky. "At night. If nothing happens, we can return tomorrow." His mother approached and placed a hand against his forehead. "You don't have a fever." "I'm fine." Her eyes filled with concern. "Then why are you speaking like this?" His father's gaze sharpened. "Is this connected to the food you brought home?" Li Wei shook his head. "No." "Then explain." "I saw something in the village." "What?" Li Wei looked around the table. His mother, his father, his older brother and pregnant sister-in-law, Li Jun and Li Lan, the family from his nightmare. "If we stay here tonight, we may die." Li Lan's chopsticks slipped from her fingers. His mother's face paled. His father stood. "Come outside." Li Wei did not move. "Father, outside." His father walked into the courtyard. After a moment, Li Han rose and followed. Li Wei looked at the others. "Eat quickly. Pack warm clothes and food." Then he turned and went after them. The three men stepped outside. The door closed behind them, cutting off the worried faces of the women and children inside. Father walked several steps away from the house before turning around. His eyes settled on his second son. "Explain." Li Wei remained silent. Father's expression hardened. "What did you mean when you said, 'We must leave the village'? What are you trying to do?" Beside him, Li Chung stared at his younger brother with concern. There was suspicion in his eyes as well. He looked as though he was trying to decide whether Li Wei was playing some foolish trick or whether the recent fever had truly damaged his mind. Li Wei took a slow breath. He could tell them the truth. He could say that he had lived through the end of another world. He could explain that their real son and brother had already died and that a stranger from the future now occupied his body. But the thought lasted only a moment. Even if they believed him, the truth would only create distance between them. Li Wei decided to lie. Not a perfect lie, only one believable enough to make them act. "A friend from town once told me about a strange illness." Father frowned. "What friend?" "Someone I met before I became sick." Li Cheng's eyes narrowed, but Li Wei continued before either of them could question him further. He said there were rumors about a condition unlike an ordinary fever. Father folded his arms. "What kind of condition?" "The infected person first develops a very high fever. Their body becomes cold even while their skin is burning. Their eyes turn red, but the pupils respond slowly to light. Dark veins begin appearing around the eyes and neck." Li Cheng's suspicious expression changed slightly. Li Wei continued. "Their muscles twitch without control. Their joints become stiff. They stop responding properly when someone speaks to them. Sometimes they grind their teeth or make sounds even while unconscious." Father's brows pulled together. "And on the second day, the person dies." Father's face darkened. Li Wei did not stop. Several hours later, the body moves again. Silence fell between them. Li Chung stared at him. Father's jaw tightened. "When they wake, they're no longer human. They attack anyone nearby. They bite them. The people they bite develop the same fever." Father's face flushed with anger. "Enough. They won't recognize their families," Li Wei said. "A mother could kill her own child. A child could tear apart his parents. Once it begins, it spreads from one person to the next." "Enough." Father stepped forward. "What kind of filth are you speaking in front of your family?" Li Chung grabbed Li Wei by the front of his shirt. "You nearly frightened mother to death." His fist tightened. "Was last night's food not enough? Now you want to play games about dead people returning to life." Li Wei did not resist. He looked directly at his older brother. "Aunt Zhao's eldest son has the fever." Li Chung froze. Father's eyes sharpened. Li Wei continued quickly. "His fever is extremely high, but his hands are cold. His eyes are bloodshot, and the veins near his temples have darkened. His pupils barely reacted when village leader Chen examined him. Li Cheng's grip loosened slightly. He twitches every few breaths, Li Wei said. His jaw clenches even while he is unconscious. There are gray patches beneath his fingernails, and his breathing pauses before suddenly becoming rapid again. Father stared at him. How do you know that? I followed village leader Chun into Aunt Zhao's house. That still doesn't prove your story. No, Li Wei admitted. But those symptoms are not normal. Father's face remained stern, but some of the fury had disappeared. Li Wei lowered his voice. You expect us to abandon our home because of a story told by some person in town. We have 2 children inside, Li Wei said. Sister-in-law is pregnant. At the mention of his wife, Li Cheng's expression changed. Li Wei looked at his father. If we leave now, we will have enough distance to escape. We can hide in the mountain for 2 days. If nothing happens, we return. And if something does happen, Father asked. Li Wei looked toward the village road. Then we will be grateful that we left. Father studied him for a long moment. Li Wei could see that he still did not believe him. Not completely, perhaps not even halfway, but doubt had appeared. That was enough. The sound of wooden wheels suddenly came from the road. All 3 men turned. A small donkey cart emerged from between the neighboring houses. Aunt Zhao sat near the front, holding the reins with trembling hands. Behind her, Zhao Ming lay beneath a warm blanket. Her younger son, Zhaoan, sat beside him, supporting his head as the cart jolted over the uneven ground. They're taking him to town, Li Cheng said. Li Wei's stomach tightened. If Zhao Ming transformed inside a crowded clinic, the infection would spread before anyone understood what was happening. Doctors, patients, families, travelers, merchants, anyone who escaped the town could carry the infection to another village. Anyone bitten could return home before the fever began. His nightmare might not remain confined to Willowbrook. Father, Li Wei said urgently. Father is already moving. He hurried toward the road. Aunt Zhao, the woman, pulled on the reins. The donkey slowed before stopping. Brother Li, Father approached with a polite smile, hiding the tension in his face. You're going to town? Aunt Zhao nodded quickly. Ming's fever has worsened. Village leader Chun said he should see a doctor. I'm taking him before it becomes too late. When did the fever begin? Yesterday morning. He said he felt tired after returning from the fields. By evening, he could barely stand. Has he awakened since then? Only for a few moments. Did he recognize you? Aunt Zhao hesitated. He looked at me, but what? He didn't speak. He only stared. Father's smile weakened. Not long ago, my second son also suffered from severe fever. Perhaps I can take a look. I may recognize something that could help before you reach town. Aunt Zhao glanced anxiously at Li Wei. Everyone in the village knew that Li Wei had nearly died. After a moment, she nodded. Please. Father moved to the back of the cart. Li Cheng followed. Li Wei stayed a step behind them. Zhao Ming's face was pale beneath the blanket. Sweat covered his forehead, yet his lips had begun turning gray. His eyes were partly open. Red veins spread across the whites. Father touched the young man's forehead, then his wrist. His expression changed. The skin burned with fever, but the hand was unnaturally cold. Zhao Ming's fingers twitched. Once, twice. His jaw suddenly clenched with a sharp grinding sound. Father's hand trembled. Beside him, Li Cheng slowly stepped backward. Every symptom Li Wei had described was there. The fever, the cold extremities, the bloodshot eyes, the dark veins, the twitching, the stiff jaw. Aunt Zhao looked between them. Is something wrong? Father withdrew his hand. His expression became calm again, but Li Wei noticed how tightly he curled his fingers into his palm. The fever is serious, Father said carefully. You should continue to town. Aunt Zhao nodded. I knew it. Thank you, Brother Li. Father forced a smile. Keep him covered. Do not let your younger son place his hands near Ming's mouth. If he begins moving strangely, keep your distance. Aunt Zhao looked confused. Moving strangely? The fever may cause convulsions. Oh, she thanked him again. Zhao adjusted his brother's blanket. For an instant, Zhao Ming's head turned toward him, his bloodshot eyes fixed on the boy's exposed wrist. Li Wei stepped forward, but father gripped his arm. "Let them go," he whispered. The donkey cart moved again. Its wheels creaked along the road until the family disappeared beyond the village entrance. No one spoke. Li Cheng's face had lost its color. Father stared after the cart. Li Wei pulled his arm free. If he reaches town and transforms there, this won't remain a problem for one family. Father remained silent. Even if the town contains it, someone may already have been bitten. They could flee here. They could return to other villages. Still no response. Li Wei looked from his father to his brother. He had already decided. If they refused to leave, he would go alone. He had survived 5 years in the apocalypse. He had died once. He was not going to die here because others were too frightened to accept what stood in front of them. "I'm leaving before dark," he said. "Whether the rest of you come with me is your decision." Li Cheng looked at father. Father continued staring down the empty road. A long moment passed. Then he turned. "We leave tonight." Li Cheng inhaled sharply. Father's voice became firm. "We will stay in the mountain for 2 days. If nothing happens, we return." Relief passed through Li Wei so quickly that his knees nearly weakened. Father pointed toward Li Cheng. "Go home. Tell your mother to prepare food, blankets, medicine, and warm clothing. Pack lightly. Do not frighten the children." Li Cheng nodded immediately. Then he ran toward the house. Father looked at Li Wei. "You're coming with me." "Where?" "To warn a few people." "You believe me now?" Father's expression remained grave. "I believe I saw something I have never seen before." He looked toward the road where the donkey cart had disappeared. "That is enough." They moved quickly. Father did not go to every house. There was no time, and shouting about dead people returning to life would only make the villagers think he had gone mad. He first visited the nearest families. At each home, he said nearly the same thing. "A strange fever has appeared. Keep your doors locked tonight. If someone becomes violent or stops recognizing you, do not approach them. If you see anyone biting or attacking another person, protect yourself and run to higher ground." Some villagers stared at him. Others laughed nervously. At one house, father forced a joking smile. "People are behaving strangely these days. Perhaps tomorrow we'll hear they've started eating each other. Lock your doors so no hungry neighbor mistakes you for dinner." The men laughed, but they promised to secure their homes. Father's humor allowed him to deliver the warning without creating panic. Before leaving, he added, "Tell your neighbors, especially families with children." Their final stop was village leader Chen's house. Chen Chong listened patiently while father described Zhao Ming's worsening condition. "I examined him myself," father said. "His fever is unlike Li Wei's. His hands are cold, his eyes are red, and his body is twitching." Village leader Chen nodded. "That is why I told his mother to take him to town. If he returns acting strangely, do not let him into the village." Chen Chong's polite smile faded slightly. "Brotherly, what exactly are you suggesting?" Father paused. "Only that everyone should be careful. Your son has only recently recovered. Fever can disturb the mind. Let him rest." Father's expression did not change. "Perhaps you are right. I'm sure the town doctor will treat Zhao Ming." "Perhaps." Village leader Chun smiled again. "I'll remind the night patrol to watch the road." "Thank you." Father turned away. As soon as they were beyond the courtyard, Li Wei asked, "He doesn't believe us." "No." "Then why did you say so little?" "Because a warning is all we can give." Father quickened his pace. "If we shout that corpses will rise, they will tie us up before sunset." They hurried home. Time was running out. Before he died, the thought followed Li Wei and his father all the way home. When they reached the courtyard, the entire family was already moving. Li Cheng had explained only that they would spend 2 nights in the mountain because of the strange fever spreading through the village. Mother did not look convinced, but she had not wasted time arguing. She and Malin packed dried grain, cooking pots, bowls, salt, clothing, and medicine into several baskets. Sister-in-law's son Li Hua folded blankets while protecting her slightly rounded stomach with one hand. Li Jun and Li Lan stood near the doorway, each carrying a small bundle. Neither child understood what was happening. "Are we camping in the mountain?" Li Jun asked. "For 2 nights," father answered. "Stay close to your brothers." Li Lan looked toward the kitchen. "Will there be dinner?" Malin tightened the bundle on the little girl's back. We'll eat when we reach the cave. Father examined everything they had prepared. Too much. Mother frowned. There are 9 of us. How can this be too much? We need to climb before dark. Take only what we can carry without slowing down. Mother's face tightened. She looked toward the house. Everything they owned was inside it. The store grain, the farming tools, the bedding she had repaired countless times, the table father had built after their marriage. Are we truly coming back in 2 days? She asked. Father paused. If nothing happens, we will return. It was not a promise. Mother understood that. She lowered her eyes and began removing items from the baskets. Li Wei watched them quietly. They did not have to abandon anything. The space could hold all of it, but he could not reveal that yet. Take the food and blankets, Li Wei said. Leave the rest. Malin looked at him. What about the cooking pot? There is one in the cave. Father glanced at him. You've been there. Once, when I was younger. The original Li Wei's memories confirmed it. The cave lay high on the eastern slope. Hunters sometimes used it during storms. It was dry, deep enough to shelter the family, and narrow at the entrance. Father nodded. Bring one small pot anyway. The sun had already begun sinking behind the fields. Father lifted one basket. Move. The family filed out of the courtyard. Li Wei remained near the doorway. Father looked back. What are you doing? I forgot something. What? My outer coat. Be quick. Li Wei waited until everyone had reached the road. Then he rushed inside. He did not retrieve a coat. He placed his hand on everything that was left behind and placed every item into a space, even the broken tools Father intended to repair. Nothing was left behind. In less than 2 minutes, the house stood nearly empty. Li Wei took the final bundle of clothing and placed it inside the space. Then he stepped outside and closed the door. The courtyard looked exactly as it had before. No one passing by would know that there was almost nothing left inside. He ran after his family. Malin looked over her shoulder as he approached. Did you find your coat? Li Wei nodded. It was under the bed. She glanced at his empty hands. Aren't you wearing it? I put it in my bundle. Malin looked at the small bundle on his back, but said nothing. The family left Willowbrook as the last light stretched across the sky. Smoke rose from kitchen chimneys. Farmers returned from the fields. Children played beside the road. Everything looked normal. That frightened Li Wei more than panic would have. None of them knew what was traveling toward town. None of them knew what might return. Father kept the family away from the main road and led them along a narrow trail behind the fields. The climb became steeper as the sunlight faded. Mother and son Li Hua tired quickly. Li Chung carried his wife's basket along with his own. Father carried Li Lan when the little girl could no longer keep up. Li Wei lifted Li Jun onto his back for the final part of the climb. By the time they reached the cave, darkness had swallowed the mountain. The entrance was hidden behind thick bushes and a large leaning rock. Father pushed the branches aside. Inside, the cave was dark and smelled of stone and old ash. Li Wei reached into his sleeve. He removed a compact battery lantern from a space. It had been stored there since before his death. The charge was already low, but it would last long enough for them to settle. He turned it on. White light filled the cave. Everyone stopped. Li Jun's mouth fell open. What is that? A lamp, Li Wei answered. Father stared at it. What kind of lamp? One from town. There is no flame, Mei Lin said. It uses a special battery. No one understood what a battery was. Fortunately, they were too tired to question him. The cave narrowed near the entrance before opening into a wider chamber. The floor was uneven but dry. An old circle of stones remained near one wall where hunters had previously built fires. Li Chung gathered dry branches while Father checked the deeper sections of the cave. There were no animals inside. No second entrance. Once the fire was burning, the family sat around it. Their baskets looked painfully small. Mother opened the pot containing the dinner they had not eaten at home. There was not enough for everyone. Li Wei stood. Give me a moment. Father looked up. Where are you going? To find water. In the dark, there's a spring nearby. Li Chung rose. I'll come. No need. You're tired. Before anyone could object, Li Wei left the cave. He walked far enough that the entrance could no longer be seen. Then he entered the space. The rice fields swayed gently beneath the artificial sky. Chickens wandered near their enclosure. The rabbits he had not yet captured remained in the mountain, but the pheasants and young boar had already settled into separate areas. Li Wei filled 2 containers with clean water. He collected eggs, tomatoes, mushrooms, cucumbers, and several pieces of fruit. He placed everything into a basket and left the space. When he returned, the family stared. Malin stood quickly. "Where did you find all that?" "Eat the leftovers. The children are hungry." Father watched him, but did not challenge him in front of everyone. Mother accepted the basket slowly. There were too many questions in her eyes. Still, hunger won. She reheated the rice while Malin boiled the eggs and sliced the vegetables. The family ate around the fire. No one spoke much. Li Jun and Li Lan fell asleep soon after eating. Son Li Hua rested against Li Cheng's shoulder. Mother placed a folded blanket beneath her head. The cave floor was hard. The cold seeped through the thin bedding. Li Wei remained near the entrance, feeding branches into the fire. Father sat across from him. Li Cheng stayed beside his wife, but did not sleep. All 3 men were hungry for answers. None of them spoke. Outside, the mountain remained quiet. Li Wei stared into the flames. He had survived the apocalypse before, but then he had only needed to protect himself. Now, there were 8 people depending on him. 2 children, a pregnant woman, his mother and father, whose bodies were already worn from years of labor. Their farmhouse could not protect them. Its wooden walls would collapse beneath a large horde. The village had no walls, no weapons beyond farming tools and hunting bows. Even if they escaped the first infected, what would happen when the infection spread through town? Where would they obtain medicine? How would they travel with the elderly, children, and a pregnant woman? How could they survive winter? Question after question filled his mind. By sunrise, he had found no perfect answer, only one decision. He had to tell them about the space. Keeping it secret would slow them down. The family needed proper bedding, supplies, and weapons. He could no longer pretend that rice, meat, and tools simply appeared whenever he went for a walk. When the sky began to brighten, Li Wei left the cave again. This time, Father followed him with his eyes, but said nothing. Li Wei returned with water, mushrooms, vegetables, rice, and a small piece of preserved meat. Mother was already awake. She looked at the ingredients. Then she looked at her son. "I'll explain after breakfast." Mother's expression became uneasy. She and Malin cooked thick porridge with mushrooms, chopped vegetables, eggs, and preserved meat. The smell filled the cave. One by one, the family woke. They sat in a circle and ate from their bowls. The warm food improved everyone's mood. Li Lan even smiled. "When are we going home?" Mother stroked her hair. "Perhaps tomorrow." Li Wei said nothing. When the final bowl had been emptied, he placed his own bowl on the ground. "There is something I need to tell everyone." The cave became quiet. Father leaned against the stone wall. Li Cheng folded his arms. Mother looked frightened before he had even begun. Li Wei took a breath. "The food I have been bringing home did not come from the mountain." Malin glanced at the empty basket. "Then where did it come from?" "I have a place that only I can enter." No one reacted at first. Li Wei continued. "It is separate from this world. There is farmland, water, animals, and storage inside it. Things grow much faster there." Mother's face slowly sank. She looked toward Father. Father closed his eyes for a moment. Li Cheng rubbed both hands over his face. Mother reached forward and touched his forehead. "You don't have a fever." "I know." "Then why are you saying these things?" A large sack of white rice appeared beside him. The heavy sack struck the ground with a dull thud. Everyone froze. Father remained perfectly still. Li Wei looked at them. "I did not steal the food." Silence filled the room. No one knew how to explain what they had just witnessed. Father studied the sack of rice for a long moment before slowly letting out a breath. Whatever questions he had could wait. Right now, keeping the family alive mattered more. He looked around at everyone until they had finally calmed down. Then he spoke. "My older sister lives in Stone Ridge Village." Father continued. "The village lies beyond Black Ridge Mountain. It takes nearly 3 days to reach on foot." "Is it isolated?" Li Wei asked. "Very." Father picked up a stick and drew lines in the dirt. The last part of the road is narrow and covered with loose stone. There are cliffs on both sides. One wrong step can send a person to their death. Mother frowned. You want to take the children there? If the illness is what Li Wei claims, the difficult path may protect us. There are no carts? Li Cheng asked. No carts. No horses. Outsiders rarely visit. Father pointed toward the far side of the mountain. Stone Ridge farms terraces between the cliffs. They have their own spring and mountain resources. If there are no infected, we can decide whether to return. If there are, we leave immediately. Today we prepare. Li Wei and Father spent the rest of the morning searching the mountain. Li Cheng remained at the cave to protect the women and children. Father gathered medicinal plants, dry wood, and edible roots. Li Wei collected anything useful and transferred into the space. He found several fruit trees and mushroom. He also returned to the rabbit burrow. Using a long branch, he touched the interior edge and focused. Loose soil, roots, and 3 startled rabbits disappeared into the space. By midday, they returned to the cave with full baskets. The family ate well. For one brief afternoon, the fear eased. Li Jun and Li Lan played near the cave entrance. Mother and son Li Hua organized food while discussing what they would cook after returning home. They still believed they might return. Even Li Cheng began acting as though their escape had been unnecessary. Nothing had chased them. No screams had reached the mountain. No smoke rose above the village. Another thick porridge. She no longer measured every drop of oil. Malin added mushrooms, vegetables, eggs, and small pieces of meat. The family ate until they were full. After breakfast, they tidied the cave and prepared their bundles. We'll return after lunch? Li Lan asked. Father looked toward Li Wei. We will decide after the village is checked. Li Wei stood. I'll go first. Li Cheng rose immediately. You're not going alone. I can move faster alone. And if someone attacks you? Li Wei glanced at his brother. I can handle myself. Li Cheng's expression darkened. I'm still your older brother. Father interrupted before they could argue. You will go together. He pointed toward Li Cheng. Listen to your brother. If he says run, you run. Li Cheng clearly disliked the instruction. Still, he nodded. Father remained behind to protect the women and children. Li Wei and Li Cheng began descending the mountain shortly before midday. At first, everything appeared normal. Birds moved through the trees. Leaves rustled in the wind. Sunlight warmed the path. As they drew closer to Willowbrook, the forest grew quiet. Li Wei slowed. Li Cheng noticed. What is it? Li Wei listened. Nothing. No axes striking wood. No farmers calling across the fields. No children shouting. No dogs barking. They reached the edge of the farmland. The fields were empty. A hole lay abandoned between 2 rows of crops. A basket had overturned near the irrigation channel, scattering vegetables across the mud. Li Cheng frowned. Perhaps everyone is resting. In the middle of the day, Li Wei scanned the distant houses. No smoke rose from the kitchens. Several doors stood open. The village was too still. A cold feeling settled in his stomach. His nightmare had begun exactly like this. Brother, Li Wei said. Li Cheng stared toward their family home. We should check the house. No, our things, there is nothing there. Li Cheng turned toward him. What? I stored everything. A faint scraping sound came from behind a nearby shed. Li Wei's body tensed. Run back. Li Cheng looked toward the sound. What is that? Run. A figure stumbled into view. It was old Wu from the western field. His clothing was torn. Blood covered his chin and neck. One arm hung uselessly at his side. Li Cheng stepped forward. Uncle Wu. The man's head snapped toward them. His eyes were clouded. His mouth opened. A low growl escaped his throat. Another figure emerged behind him. Then another. 5 infected stumbled from between the houses. For 1 second, none of them moved. Then the infected saw the brothers. They charged. Li Cheng froze. His face emptied of all color. Those are. The nearest infected crossed the field with terrifying speed. Li Wei reached for his brother. Move! Li Cheng did not respond. The first infected lunged. Before either brother could retreat, it was already upon them. Old Wu lunged. Li Cheng froze. Second brother. A spear flashed past him. The iron point pierced old Wu's eye and drove deep into his skull. His body struck the ground before Li Cheng finished speaking. Li Wei pulled the spear free. Move! A courtyard gate slammed open. Two figures rushed into the road. Another climbed over a low wall. Growls rose from farther inside the village. Li Wei reached into the space. A second spear appeared in his hand. He threw it toward Li Cheng. Catch! Li Cheng barely caught the shaft before the first infected reached them. It was a woman from the western end of the village. Blood covered her chin, and one sleeve hung empty beneath the elbow. Li Cheng thrust. The spearhead entered her shoulder. She did not slow. Her remaining hand closed around the shaft. She pulled herself forward, mouth opening and closing as she climbed along the weapon. Li Cheng's face went white. Li Wei stepped past him. His spear shot through her temple. She collapsed at Li Cheng's feet. Head. That was all he had time to say. The second infected struck him from the side. Li Wei twisted away. Its fingers tore through the outer layer of his robe, but failed to catch his arm. He reversed the spear and drove the iron, but into its jaw. Bone cracked. The infected staggered. Li Wei thrust once. It fell. More footsteps pounded across the dirt. Figures poured from courtyards and narrow lanes. Some stumbled from houses with blood covering their clothes. Others rushed from the vegetable fields beyond the village walls. 5, then 8, then more. Li Wei turned toward the eastern road. 3 infected already blocked it. The path back to the mountain was closing. Run! He charged toward the southern lane. Li Cheng followed. An infected farmer burst from behind a broken cart. Li Wei drove the spear through its mouth without slowing. The point caught inside the skull. He released the weapon immediately. A wood-cutting axe appeared in his hand. The next infected reached him. The axe rose. Crack! The creature dropped. Li Wei stepped over it and continued running. Li Cheng glanced behind them. The infected were following. Some moved slowly. Others sprinted with their bodies bent forward, crashing into walls and fences without feeling the impact. One climbed across the cart Li Wei had just passed. Another crawled beneath it. Li Cheng nearly stopped. Li Wei seized his shoulder and shoved him forward. A man stumbled from a doorway directly in front of them. Li Cheng raised his spear too late. Li Wei kicked the infected in the chest. It crashed backward through the open door. A second figure emerged behind it. Li Wei swung the axe horizontally. The blade struck the side of its skull. He tore it free and ran on. Li Cheng followed so closely that he almost stepped on his heels. The southern lane narrowed between 2 mud brick houses. A wooden ladder leaned against one wall. Li Wei grabbed it as he passed and pulled. The ladder fell across the road. The first infected crashed into it. The others piled behind it. It would not stop them for long. It did not need to. The brothers gained several breaths. Then a growl came from above. Li Wei looked up. An infected woman fell from a roof. He shoved Li Cheng aside. The woman struck the ground between them, rolled once, and sprang up with unnatural speed. Li Wei's axe came down. She raised both arms. The blade split through one forearm and lodged in her shoulder. She still lunged. Li Wei released the axe. A short saber appeared in his hand. One step, one slash. Her head snapped to the side, and her body collapsed. Go! They ran again. The lane opened behind the grain sheds. A dozen infected wandered between the buildings. Every head turned. Li Cheng stopped. Li Wei did not. He drew a long spear from the space and lowered the point. The first infected rushed him. He thrust through its face and used the body as a barrier, driving it into the next 2. All 3 fell together. Li Wei stepped onto the nearest corpse, wrenched the spear free, and stabbed downward twice. 2 skulls broke. The third grabbed his ankle. He drove the spear, but into its temple. Once. Twice. The grip loosened. Li Cheng reached him. An infected came from the left. Li Cheng swung his spear. The shaft struck its ribs. It barely reacted. The creature seized the weapon. Li Cheng pulled back. The infected pulled harder. Another rushed toward him from behind. Release it. Li Cheng let go. Li Wei's saber flashed past his shoulder. The infected behind him fell. A short-handled axe flew from Li Wei's other hand. Li Cheng caught it against his chest. Right. Li Cheng turned and swung. The axe buried itself in the forehead of the infected holding his spear. The impact drove it backward, but the blade stuck. Li Cheng tried to pull it free. The creature's hands rose. Li Wei kicked its chest. Leave it. Li Cheng released the axe. Another weapon appeared before him. A heavy iron hammer. He caught it with both hands. There was no time to question how many weapons Li Wei carried inside the space. The infected were already upon them. Li Wei moved first. The saber cut across one throat. He stepped inside the reach of another, struck its knee, and drove the blade through its eye as it fell. A third grabbed the back of his robe. He twisted, allowed the cloth to tear, and slammed the saber hilt into its temple. Li Cheng swung the hammer. The first blow struck an infected shoulder. The second struck its face. The third crushed the side of its skull. The body fell. Li Cheng stood over it, breathing hard. Move! Li Wei struck aside a reaching arm and cut through the infected, blocking the road. They forced their way between the grain sheds. The passage was barely wide enough for two men. Li Wei took the lead, one infected at a time. A spear appeared in his hand. Thrust. Withdraw. Thrust again. Each body blocked the creatures behind it for a moment. Li Cheng followed, striking anything that reached around the fallen corpses. They emerged onto the lower road. Li Wei looked once toward the mountain. The path was visible beyond the northern fields. Li Cheng saw it too. The cave. No. The answer came instantly. More infected spilled from behind them. Li Cheng pointed uphill. We can reach it. They'll follow. Li Wei turned south. The river. He ran. Li Cheng followed without another word. The lower road sloped between vegetable fields and animal pens. A goat pulled against its rope beside a fence, screaming as infected rushed from a nearby house. One creature turned toward the sound. Then another. Li Wei cut the rope as he passed. The goat bolted across the field. Several infected broke from the horde and chased it. The rest continued after the brothers. Li Wei did not look back again. A low fence blocked the end of the road. He planted one foot on the rail and vaulted over. Li Cheng tried to follow. His wet palms slipped. He struck the fence and fell hard on the other side. Li Wei turned. An infected reached across the rails and caught Li Cheng's robe. Li Cheng rolled, but the cloth tightened around his neck. Li Wei drove the spear through the creature's mouth. Another crashed into the fence beside it. The old wood broke. Li Wei seized Li Cheng by the arm and pulled him upright. Run! They crossed a narrow irrigation ditch. Li Wei jumped. Li Cheng landed badly and stumbled to one knee. An infected dropped into the ditch behind him. Its hands closed around his calf. Li Cheng kicked, but the creature held on. Li Wei reversed his spear and drove the point downward. The infected stopped moving. Li Cheng scrambled up. The hammer was gone. Li Wei threw him a short spear. This time Li Cheng caught it cleanly. They ran through the fields. Rice stalks brushed their legs. The ground was soft beneath their feet, slowing every step. Behind them, infected spilled from the road into the field. Some sank ankle deep in the mud. Others fell and crawled forward. The brothers gained distance. Then figures appeared ahead. 3 infected stood near the irrigation wheel. One turned. The other 2 followed. Li Wei changed direction. The infected moved to intercept. He increased his speed. The first lunged. Li Wei dropped low and drove his shoulder into its waist. The creature flipped over him and struck the mud. He stabbed backward without looking. The spear entered its skull. The second reached for his face. Li Wei knocked its hand aside, stepped inside, and drove his elbow into its jaw. It did not feel pain. It did not need to. The blow turned its head long enough for the spear point to enter through its ear. The third rushed Li Cheng. Li Cheng raised his weapon. For the first time, he did not hesitate. He stepped forward and thrust. The point entered beneath the infected's chin. The creature continued moving. Li Cheng planted his rear foot, gripped the shaft with both hands, and shoved upward. The iron point broke through the top of its skull. It fell. Li Cheng stared only for a breath. Then he released the spear and ran. The river appeared beyond the final stretch of farmland. Its banks were swollen from recent rain. Brown water rushed around stones and broken branches. Li Cheng's steps faltered. The horde behind them filled the field. "Jump," Li Wei said. They were still too far from the bank. 6 infected emerged from a riverside hut. Li Wei's eyes narrowed. He took a broad-bladed saber from his space. The first came at him with both arms raised. Li Wei cut through one knee. The creature fell beneath the feet of the others. 2 tumbled over it. He stepped onto the nearest back and drove the saber downward. The blade entered one skull and stuck. Li Wei released it. An iron staff appeared in his hands. He swung. The end struck an infected's temple with a dull crack. He swung again in the opposite direction. Another fell. Li Cheng stabbed the creature crawling toward his ankle. The last 2 came together. Li Wei thrust the staff between them, braced it across both throats, and shoved. They staggered backward. Li Cheng drove his spear through the first. Li Wei released the staff, caught the second by its robe, and used its momentum to throw it down the riverbank. It rolled into the water. The current seized it. The horde was nearly upon them. Now, Li Cheng reached the bank. He looked at the rushing water once. Then he jumped. The river swallowed him. Li Wei turned. The nearest infected was only 3 steps away. He took a hunting bow from his space. There was no time to aim carefully. He drew and released. The arrow entered the creature's eye. Li Wei dropped the bow, took 2 steps, and jumped. Cold water closed over his head. The current dragged him sideways. He surfaced several paces downstream. Li Cheng was nowhere in sight. Li Wei swam hard. A head broke through the water ahead. Li Cheng coughed, sank, and surfaced again. "Second brother." Li Wei reached him and caught the back of his robe. "Swim." "I can't kick." An infected fell into the river behind them. Then another. Bodies splashed into the water as the horde reached the bank. Some disappeared beneath the surface. Others surfaced and flailed with stiff arms. One came up close enough to seize Li Cheng's shoulder. Li Wei drove a dagger into its temple. The current tore the body away. A broken branch floated past. Li Wei caught it and shoved it toward his brother. Li Cheng wrapped one arm around it. Together, they angled toward the far bank. The current fought them. Their clothes dragged heavily. Li Cheng lost his grip. His head went under. Li Wei caught his wrist and pulled. A dark shape moved beneath them. Hands closed around Li Wei's ankle. He was dragged downward. Li Wei twisted in the water. An infected clung to his leg. Pale face turned upward, mouth opening beneath the surface. The dagger appeared again. Li Wei stabbed through its forehead. The grip vanished. He kicked free and surfaced. The opposite bank was close. Li Cheng reached the reeds first. He grabbed a fistful and pulled himself toward the mud. Li Wei shoved him from behind. Both brothers crawled onto the bank. Li Cheng collapsed. Li Wei looked across the river. Infected crowded the opposite side. Some continued walking into the water. Others were being carried downstream. Several dark forms moved beneath the surface. 5 had already reached a shallow bend farther north. They were crossing. Up. Li Cheng did not move. Li Wei caught his arm and hauled him to his feet. They ran. Water poured from their robes. The ground rose beyond the riverbank. At first, they crossed open grass. Then they entered the trees at the base of the mountain. Branches struck their faces and arms. The slope grew steeper. Li Cheng slipped. Li Wei pulled him up. A splash sounded behind them. Then another. The infected had reached the bank. Their growls followed through the trees. Li Cheng glanced back. 6 figures staggered up the slope. 2 more crawled from the river. He turned toward the mountain path. The cave lay above them. Too close. If the infected reached the trail, they would climb until they found the family. Li Wei stopped. Li Cheng took several more steps before realizing he was alone. He turned. "Go." Li Wei drew a long knife from the space. Li Cheng shook his head. "Go to the cave." The infected were getting closer. Li Cheng tightened his grip on the empty air. He had lost his weapon in the river. Li Wei threw him another spear. "Keep them inside." Li Cheng caught it. "What about you?" Li Wei was already descending. "Run." Li Cheng hesitated only once. Then he turned and climbed. Li Wei moved down the slope. The first infected rushed between 2 trees. Li Wei stepped aside. The creature passed him. He drove the knife through the base of its skull. It fell without a sound. The second came from the right. Li Wei kicked loose soil down the slope. Its foot slipped. It dropped to one knee. The knife entered through its eye. Li Wei pulled it free. Two more arrived together. He retreated between a pair of closely grown trees. The narrow gap forced them into a single line. The first reached through. Li Wei seized its wrist, pulled it forward, and drove the knife beneath its chin. The body jammed between the trunks. The next infected pushed against it. Li Wei released the knife. A spear appeared. He thrust through the first corpse and into the skull behind it. Both bodies collapsed together. A growl came from his left. Li Wei turned. An infected crashed into him. They struck the ground and rolled down the slope. The spear flew from his hand. The creature landed on top of him. Its teeth snapped near his cheek. Li Wei wedged his forearm beneath its throat. A short iron spike appeared in his free hand. He drove it upward. The point entered beneath the jaw. The infected went still. Li Wei pushed the body away and rose. Another was already upon him. He ducked beneath its arms and drove his shoulder into its chest. The creature stumbled backward. Li Wei seized its robe and pulled. It fell past him and rolled down the mountain. It struck a tree hard enough to break its neck. Still, its arms moved. Li Wei descended after it. A woodcutting axe appeared in his hands. One blow ended it. The remaining infected were scattered across the slope. 3. One moved quickly. Two dragged damaged legs behind them. Li Wei attacked the fast one first. It lunged. He swung the axe. The blade struck its forearm instead of its head. Bone broke, but the creature continued forward. Li Wei released the axe. He stepped inside its reach, caught the back of its neck, and drove its face into a tree trunk. Once, twice. On the third impact, the skull cracked. He let it fall. The two slower infected approached from opposite sides. Li Wei drew a long saber. The first reached him. He cut through its knee and allowed it to collapse. The second grabbed his sleeve. Li Wei turned with a pull. The movement carried him behind it. He drove the saber through the back of its skull. The blade lodged. He placed one foot against the creature's back and pulled. The saber came free. The infected at his feet crawled closer. Li Wei brought the blade down. Silence returned to the slope. He did not climb yet. He continued downward. The trail back to the river was marked by broken branches and churned soil. Li Wei followed it carefully. One infected lay tangled in exposed roots. It raised its head as he approached. The saber entered its temple. Another had crawled only halfway from the river before becoming trapped in thick reeds. Li Wei crossed the mud and ended it. Then he waited. Across the river, infected still moved along the far bank. Several had wandered downstream. Others remained near the place where the brothers had jumped. None had reached this side. No growls came from the trees. No branches moved. The trail was clear. Li Wei turned and climbed. He covered the marks where he and Li Cheng had entered the mountain. He dragged branches across the lower path and scattered leaves over the deepest footprints. Then he continued upward. The slope seemed steeper on the return. His wet clothes clung to his body. Blood covered one sleeve. None of it was his. He kept climbing. A figure appeared between the trees above him. Li Cheng stood on the trail with a spear in both hands. Behind him was Father, gripping a woodcutting axe. Li Wei's expression darkened. "I told you to stay inside." Father looked past him. "Anything following?" "No." That was enough. They returned to the cave. Mother pulled Li Cheng inside the moment she saw him. The younger children stared at the blood on both brothers' clothes. Father remained near the entrance. The village. Li Wei set the saber beside the wall. Overrun. Li Wei turned to Li Cheng. "Gome." The brothers left the cave. Li Wei led Li Cheng into a patch of dense bushes before stopping. "Take off the bloody clothes." They quickly checked each other for bites. Neither had been bitten. Both had a few shallow scratches, which Li Wei immediately disinfected. Li Cheng watched him silently. "What if I was scratched?" "We disinfect it and watch for fever. And if I was bitten?" Li Wei looked him in the eyes. "Then I'd have to kill you before you turned." Li Cheng felt a chill run through his body. "And if it were me?" "You do the same." Neither brother spoke again. Li Wei stored their bloody clothes inside the space before taking out 2 military uniforms, combat boots, and gloves. The material is much thicker than ours. It'll protect us better. Li Cheng touched the strange fabric. Where did we protect the family first? Questions later. I only have 4 good sets. 2 more are damaged. The brothers dressed and returned to the cave. Mother hurried toward them. What happened? Why are your clothes? Mother. Li Wei smiled faintly. We're starving. Only then did she realize no one had prepared lunch. Everyone had been too worried, waiting for them to return. I'll start cooking. Sister-in-law immediately unpacked the food. Li Wei brought out clean water, several cans of tuna, and some seasonings. Cook the rice into a thick porridge. Add vegetables, eggs, and one of these. He handed Father another military uniform. This should fit. Father changed without asking questions. Li Wei brought out several pairs of combat boots. Father tried them and chose the closest size. No one asked where any of it came from. Lunch was ready soon. Thick vegetable and egg porridge mixed with tuna. Warm flatbread. Boiled eggs. Fresh water. Everyone ate quietly. Mother and sister-in-law barely touched their bowls. Eat. Li Wei's voice was calm. We'll need the strength. Neither woman argued. After lunch, Li Wei looked at his brother. Tell them. Li Cheng slowly recounted everything. Old Wu, the infected, the village, the river, the endless pursuit. By the time he finished, everyone had gone pale. Father finally nodded. We leave tomorrow. At first light, Li Wei said, the longer we stay, the greater the danger. Mother immediately stood. We'll prepare everything tonight. Li Wei drew several lines on the ground. Father leads. The children stay in the middle. Mother and sister-in-law protect them. Li Cheng watches the side. I guard the rear. He raised one hand. This means stop. 2 fingers. Move. A fist. Hide. No shouting. Both children nodded nervously. Everything goes into the space except today's food and water. We stay off the main roads. We don't stop unless necessary. Everyone memorized the plan. The rest of the evening disappeared quickly. Blankets, tools, medicine, everything went into the space. Father and Li Cheng reinforced everyone's shoes with extra leather so they could survive the mountain trails. Before long, darkness filled the cave. Everyone slept early. Long before sunrise, mother and sister-in-law woke. Using the remaining flour, eggs, and vegetables, they made dozens of pancakes. Each person carried water and a few pancakes. Everything else disappeared into the space. As dawn painted the eastern sky, Father took the first step. The family quietly left the cave. Father walked in front. Mother followed with the youngest girl. Sister-in-law held the young boy's hand. Li Cheng guarded the right. Li Wei remained behind everyone. The mountain forest was quiet. Only birds could be heard. For half the morning, nothing happened. They avoided every visible trail and walked through dense forest whenever possible. By noon, they reached the foot of the mountain. A narrow dirt road cut across the valley. Stone ridge lay beyond it. There was no choice. They had to cross. Li Wei observed the road for several minutes. Nothing moved. He raised 2 fingers. Move. Father crossed first. Mother followed. The children hurried after her. Then, a rotten hand burst from the roadside dish. The youngest girl screamed. An infected climbed out. Then another. Then 3 more. The scream echoed through the valley. Li Wei's expression changed instantly. No. The woods answered. Growls echoed from every direction. Figures began stumbling out from behind abandoned carts. More emerged from the nearby trees. Several appeared around a ruined farmhouse farther down the road. Then even more. 20, 30. Li Wei's heart sank. The scream had attracted everything nearby. Run! The family sprinted toward the opposite mountain. Li Cheng stayed beside them. Li Wei remained alone on the road. The first infected reached him. A spear appeared. Thrust. Skull pierced. He released it immediately. A saber appeared. 1 slash. Another infected fell. A third rushed from behind. Li Wei spun. The saber split its neck before it could bite. 5 more arrived. Too close. An axe appeared. The heavy blade crushed one skull. The backswing shattered another jaw. The third grabbed the axe handle. Li Wei let it go. An iron hammer appeared. Bang! Its skull exploded. The remaining infected reached him together. Li Wei kicked the overturned cart. The old wooden cart rolled sideways and crashed into the horde. Several infected stumbled over one another. He didn't stay. He ran. The family had already reached the hillside. Behind him, the infected climbed over the broken cart. Faster than before, Li Wei sprinted uphill. Halfway up, an infected burst from behind a boulder. It lunged directly at Mother. She froze. Father reacted first. His axe swung with all his strength. Crack! The blade buried itself inside the infected skull. Father couldn't pull it back out. He abandoned it immediately. Keep moving. Another infected appeared. Li Chung stepped forward. His spear struck its chest. It kept coming. Li Chung retreated. It grabbed the shaft. Li Chung twisted hard. The spear slipped free. Before the infected could attack again, a knife flew past his shoulder, straight into its eye. Li Wei didn't slow down. He caught up to the family. Move! Nobody stopped. Behind them, the valley erupted. More infected poured onto the road. At least 40 now. The children heard them. Neither dared scream again. The family climbed desperately through the forest. Branches whipped against their faces. Loose rocks rolled beneath their feet. Li Wei kept looking behind. Too many. Far too many. They're gaining. Father shouted. Li Wei scanned the mountains. Then he saw it. A massive dead pine leaned across the slope. Its roots had already begun pulling free from the earth. Father, he pointed. Take everyone past that tree. Father understood immediately. The family ran ahead. Li Chung remained beside Li Wei. What do we do? We buy time. Li Wei pulled a two-man crosscut saw from the space. Li Chung stared. Seriously? Cut the roots. Li Chung dropped to his knees and began sawing. Li Wei stepped onto the narrow trail alone. The infected reached him. 1, 2, 5, 10. He switched weapons almost every heartbeat. Spear, hammer, saber, hatchet. Each strike killed. Each kill bought another second. The trail was so narrow, only two infected could attack together. Bodies quickly piled in front of him. The next infected climbed over the dead. Li Wei kicked the corpse pile. Several rolled downhill into the ones behind them. The horde slowed. Not enough. Almost. Li Chung shouted. Li Wei glanced back. Only one thick root remained. The infected were already climbing over their own dead. Li Wei took one step back. Another. Then another. The final root snapped. Now, both brothers threw themselves aside. The ancient pine crashed down the mountainside. The impact shook the entire slope. Several infected disappeared beneath the trunk. Others tumbled downhill with loose rocks and broken branches. The entire trail vanished beneath the fallen tree. Li Wei didn't wait to see more. Run! The brothers sprinted uphill. Behind them, the growls never stopped. The fallen tree had delayed the horde. It hadn't stopped it. Not even close. The chase had only just begun. The family didn't stop until the growls behind them had completely disappeared. Li Wei raised a hand. 1 minute. Everyone dropped where they stood. The children drank greedily from their water flasks. Father sat against a tree, breathing heavily. Li Chung wiped the sweat from his face. Li Wei took a few mouthfuls of water before looking toward the sun. We move. Mother looked surprised. So soon. We need more distance. We still have to find somewhere to spend the night. Nobody argued. Within a minute, everyone was back on their feet. They continued deeper into the mountains. The afternoon passed quickly. The sun slowly drifted westward, casting long shadows through the forest. Nearly 3 hours later, just before dusk, Li Wei finally stopped. Ahead of them was a small cave hidden behind vines and thick bushes. Father walked inside first. It'll do. The women immediately began heating the leftover porridge. Li Wei took fruit, dried meat, fresh water, and several eggs from the space. He also added another piece of preserved meat. Everyone ate. While they prepared dinner, Li Wei walked around the area alone. He studied every trail leading toward the cave. Every slope, every cliff, every large tree. Dinner was simple. Hot porridge, preserved meat, fruit, boiled eggs. Everyone ate until they were full. Li Wei then placed another sack of flour beside Mother. Scallion pancakes tomorrow morning. Mother nodded. Once dinner was finished, Li Wei filled a large iron pot with water and set it over the fire. When the water became hot, he poured it into several wooden basins. "Soak your feet," he said. No one questioned him. After an entire day of climbing mountains, everyone's feet were swollen and aching. One after another, they removed their boots and lowered their feet into the warm water. Several sighs escaped almost immediately. "It feels much better," Mother said softly. Father nodded in agreement. Li Cheng leaned back against the cave wall, feeling the soreness slowly leave his legs. Li Wei quietly added more firewood before checking everyone's boots one last time. Any loose straps or worn soles were repaired while they rested. When the water had cooled, everyone emptied the basins, packed them away, and prepared to sleep. Father stood and picked up his axe. "I'll take the first watch." Li Cheng nodded. "I'll take the second." Li Wei looked toward the cave entrance. "I'll take the last." No one objected. Within minutes, the cave fell silent. The children were the first to fall asleep. Soon after, Mother and sister-in-law closed their eyes as well. Only the crackling fire and the distant sounds of the forest remained. Outside, the night passed quietly. None of them knew. By tomorrow morning, they would no longer be alone. The eastern sky had only begun to brighten when Li Cheng suddenly heard voices. He immediately woke Li Wei. "There are people." Li Wei grabbed his spear and quietly walked outside. The voices grew closer. Not infected. Too steady. Too organized. Human footsteps. Several figures soon emerged through the trees. 2 men. 2 women. 2 small children being carried. Everyone looked exhausted. Li Wei stepped into the trail. "Stop!" Every one of them froze. One of the men slowly stepped forward. He wore a friendly smile. "We mean no harm. Why are you here?" The dead came back to life. They started attacking the living. "We barely escaped." Li Wei watched him for several seconds, then simply nodded. He turned around. "Pack everything." Within moments, every blanket, pot, and bag had disappeared into the space. Everyone put on their boots. Father picked up his axe. Li Cheng grabbed his spear. "We leave immediately." The smiling man blinked. "So soon?" Li Wei ignored him. "We move." The family quickly disappeared into the forest. Seeing they were being left behind, the strangers hurried after them. About 20 minutes later, Li Wei suddenly looked back. His pupils shrank. Infected. More than 20 of them were sprinting through the trees. The strangers had unknowingly led them straight to the cave. "Run!" The entire forest erupted into chaos. Branches snapped beneath everyone's feet. The children cried. The adults picked them up and ran. Li Wei remained at the rear, killing every infected that got too close. During the confusion, the smiling man stumbled. "Run!" The mountain path erupted into chaos. The strangers' family scattered. The smiling man rushed to the front, trying to put as much distance between himself and the infected as possible. An older woman behind him stumbled. She fell heavily onto the trail. Before anyone could help her, 2 infected threw themselves at her. Her scream echoed through the forest. The others didn't stop. They couldn't. Li Wei remained at the rear, cutting down every infected that got too close to his family. More rushed past the fallen woman. The smiling man looked back once before continuing to run. His footing slipped on a loose stone. In that brief moment, an infected burst from the trees. Its jaws clamped onto his forearm. The man cried out and struck it repeatedly until it released him. He stumbled backward, then turned and ran after everyone else. Blood seeped into his sleeve as he ran. No one noticed. Everyone's attention was fixed on the infected charging behind them. The saber flashed again. Another infected collapsed. Li Wei did not stop. He drove straight into the horde. The broad blade swept across the mountain trail. 3 infected fell together. Before the bodies struck the ground, Li Wei was already moving. His shoulder slammed into another infected. The creature stumbled backward, knocking several others off balance. The saber descended. Another head rolled away. The infected continued pouring through the trees. More and more. They seemed endless. Li Wei advanced instead of retreating. Every step forced the infected backward. The narrow trail became packed with bodies. Soon the dead covered the ground. The infected behind no longer had solid footing. They tripped over the corpses. Some tumbled down the slope. Others crawled over the growing pile. Li Wei seized the opening. He rushed forward. The saber became a silver blur. Wherever it passed, bodies fell. Necks split apart. Heads struck the earth one after another. The pressure finally eased. Only for a moment. A low growl echoed through the forest. Several infected abandoned the trail entirely. They crashed through the undergrowth, trying to circle around him. Li Wei's eyes narrowed. So they begun to spread out. He immediately changed direction. Instead of holding the center of the path, he rushed toward the slope. The first infected climbing through the brush had barely reached the trail. The saber swept upward. Its head flew into the trees. Another jumped from above. Li Wei stepped aside. It landed where he had been standing. Before it could rise, the blade pierced the back of its skull. He pulled it free in one motion. The infected from the trail had already caught up. Li Wei kicked one body downhill. It rolled through the brush, knocking several infected off the slope. Without waiting to see the result, he charged back toward the center. The saber rose. The saber fell. The infected could not close the distance. Anyone who reached him died. Anyone behind them climbed over the dead. The pile grew taller. The trail became narrower. Finally, Li Wei heard nothing but the heavy footsteps of his own family far ahead. They had gained enough distance. He no longer needed to hold this position. The saber vanished. Li Wei turned and disappeared into the forest. By the time the infected clawed their way over the mountain of corpses, he was already gone. The two families continued through the mountains. Unlike Li Wei's family, the strangers were barely holding on. They had fled for 2 days without proper rest. The little food they had carried was long gone. The two children walked with dry lips and pale faces, while the adults forced themselves forward despite their growling stomachs. Fear was the only thing keeping them on their feet. Li Wei's family was in better condition, but not by much. They had skipped breakfast and spent the entire morning fleeing from the infected. Everyone was hungry. Still, no one suggested stopping. Only after the sun had risen high into the sky and there was no sign of pursuit did Li Wei finally raise his hand. "We rest." Everyone immediately sat down. Mother opened the bundle of scallion pancakes she had prepared the previous night, while Li Wei handed out water. As she distributed the food, Mother noticed the two children staring quietly at the pancakes. Their lips were cracked. Their faces were thin. She hesitated only briefly before wrapping 2 pancakes in a cloth and filling a bamboo flask with water. She walked over. For the children, the young girl quickly stood. "Auntie, take them." The young girl bowed. "Thank you." She accepted them with both hands before dividing the food equally between her younger brother and sister. The children smiled happily as they ate. After a short rest, both families continued their journey. The strangers remained several paces behind. By the hour of shun, everyone's pace had slowed. The mountain remained visible in the distance, yet blocked valleys and steep cliffs forced them to take repeated detours. What should have taken only a few days would now require several more. No one complained. As the sun sank toward the western mountains, Li Wei selected an open slope overlooking the forest. "We camp here." The men gathered firewood. Mother and sister-in-law prepared supper. Li Wei quietly walked over. "Mother." She looked up at another measure of rice. She immediately understood. "There is enough." Li Wei nodded. "My space can feed everyone." Mother smiled faintly before pouring more rice into the pot. Soon the scent of porridge drifted through the camp. Eggs were added. Wild vegetables followed. Li Wei quietly placed several preserved fruits beside Mother. When a meal was finished, Mother first served her own family. Only after everyone had eaten did she ask sister-in-law to call the others. "There aren't enough bowls. You'll have to eat from the pot." The strangers nodded repeatedly. "That is more than enough." They approached. Looking inside the pot, all 4 froze. There was still plenty of porridge. Several eggs remained. Fresh fruit had been placed beside the fire. Only then did they realize this had never been leftovers. Li Wei's family had prepared enough food for them from the very beginning. The young girl lowered her head. "Thank you, Auntie." Mother smiled. "Eat while it's hot." No one spoke after that. The strangers quietly finished their meal. Once they were done, the young girl stood. She bowed respectfully. "Auntie, allow me to wash the pot." Mother nodded. "Then I'll trouble you." The young girl quickly washed the cooking pot, bowls, chopsticks, and utensils before returning everything neatly. Meanwhile, Mother quietly prepared another batch of scallion pancakes for the journey ahead. This time, she made enough to share. After everyone soaked their aching feet in warm water, the women and children lay down to sleep. Father took the first watch. The two men from the other family fell asleep almost immediately after 2 sleepless days. Only the young girl remained awake beside the dying fire. Halfway through the night, Li Wei walked over. "You should rest." The young girl shook her head. "They haven't slept for 2 days." "I'll watch." Li Wei looked toward the dark forest. "I'll keep watch. If anything happens, I'll wake everyone." The young girl hesitated before bowing. "Thank you." She finally lay down beside her younger brother and sister. The night passed peacefully. At first light, both families resumed their journey. The mountain grew larger with every passing hour. Even so, countless detours continued to delay them. What should have been a short journey had now been extended by another 2 or 3 days. It couldn't be helped. When they grew tired, they rested. When they recovered, they walked. As evening approached, Li Wei once again chose an open hillside for the night. Mother soon learned more about the young girl. She wasn't related to the 2 men. The children were her younger brother and sister. Their mother had died while fleeing the village. Since then, she had cared for them alone. Mother's heart softened. From then on, she had the young girl walk beside her and sister-in-law. No one objected. That evening, the 2 men slept early. Li Wei's second brother took the first watch. Father relieved him during the second half of the night. The women and children slept soundly. The mountains remained silent. Then, crunch, crunch. Father's eyes suddenly opened. Before he could react, Li Wei was already on his feet. That sound, he would never mistake it. A bite. His hand reached into the space. A spear appeared instantly. At the edge of the camp, the young girl had already awakened. She turned just in time to see one of the men pinning the other to the ground. Blood poured from the victim's neck. The man no longer looked human. His mouth tore at flesh again and again. The young girl's face turned pale. She grabbed a thick piece of firewood beside the campfire. Without hesitation, she swung. Bang! The zombie staggered sideways. She struck again. Bang! Bang! The wood splintered. The zombie turned toward her with blood dripping from its mouth. It lunged. Before it reached her, a spear shot forward like lightning. Thud! The spear pierced straight through the zombie's skull. Its body collapsed instantly. Li Wei stepped forward, pulled the spear free, and looked toward the other man. Half his neck had already been torn away. His eyes had lost all light. There was nothing anyone could do. Silence fell over the camp. The only sound that remained was the crackling of the dying fire. Li Wei withdrew his spear. The zombie collapsed with a heavy thud. A short distance away, the other man still twitched weakly. Blood continued to flow from the mangled wound across his neck, soaking into the mountain earth. Li Wei spared him only a single glance. With a thought, another spear appeared in his hand. Thud! The spear pierced straight through the man's forehead. The struggling ceased. Silence returned to the forest. Li Wei pulled the spear free and spoke calmly. Search yourselves. At once, everyone rolled back their sleeves. Collars were loosened. Trouser legs were lifted. Each person carefully examined the others, unwilling to overlook even the faintest scratch. The mountain breeze stirred the leaves overhead. For a long while, no one spoke. Finally, no bite, no scratches. Only then did the tightness in everyone's chest ease. Father and the 2 elder brothers gathered fallen branches from the surrounding woods. Before long, 2 funeral pyres had been built. The flames rose quietly beneath the fading stars. No prayers were spoken. No tears were shed. Everyone simply stood in silence as the fire consumed the bodies. The dead could no longer be buried. Fire was the only mercy left to them. When the flames had nearly died, Li Wei covered the embers with earth. By then, the eastern sky had begun to pale. We leave. The company continued deeper into the mountains. With 2 lives lost, the road became quieter than before. Xing walked beside Mother while guiding her younger brother and sister along the narrow paths. No one complained. For several days, the mountains remained peaceful. Not a single wandering corpse crossed their path. At dawn, they set out. At noon, they rested briefly. Before nightfall, they found shelter beneath cliffs or ancient pines. When darkness fell, they kept watch in turns. Day after day, the journey continued in the same quiet rhythm. Near midday on the second day, Mother untied the cloth bundle she had carried upon her back. Inside were the scallion pancakes she had prepared before they departed. Li Wei handed around bamboo flasks filled with water. As Mother distributed the food, she noticed Xing's younger brother and sister watching the pancakes in silence. The mountain journey had left their lips dry. Their small faces had grown noticeably thinner. Without a word, Mother wrapped 2 pancakes inside a clean cloth and placed them into Xing's hands. For the children, Xing hurriedly stood. Auntie, Mother gently pushed the bundle back toward her. Take them. Xing lowered her eyes. Thank you. She carefully divided the pancakes into equal portions before giving one to each child. Neither hurried to eat. They took small bites, carefully savoring every mouthful. Mother watched quietly, her expression softening. Several more peaceful days passed. Little by little, Xing became familiar with Li Wei's family. She gathered wild herbs alongside Mother, fetched water with sister-in-law. Whenever her younger sister grew tired, she silently carried the little girl upon her back. She worked without complaint. Even Father found himself nodding in approval. One afternoon, while everyone rested beneath an ancient pine, Xing walked over to Li Wei. Young Master Li. Li Wei looked up. She hesitated briefly. The grain, the water, the weapons, they all appear from nowhere. If it is not an inconvenience, may I ask how? Li Wei remained silent for a moment before answering. Years ago, fortune favored me. I obtained an extraordinary treasure. Xing blinked. A treasure? Li Wei nodded. Within it lies a space capable of storing countless things. It recognizes only its master. Xing nodded slowly. I understand. I shall ask no further. True to her word, she never mentioned it again. Li Wei silently approved. Curiosity was common. Knowing when to stop was far more rare. That evening, after everyone had finished their meal, Mother quietly sat beside Li Wei. Weier, you have already come of age. Li Wei nearly choked on his porridge. Mother pretended not to notice. That child, Xing. Li Wei remained silent. Mother continued. She is diligent. She has endured hardship. She knows how to manage a household. She has raised those 2 children with her own hands. Mother glanced toward Xing, who was quietly washing the cooking pot beside the stream. Our family lacks neither grain nor means. When her younger brother and sister grow, they will become capable hands. Li Wei rubbed the bridge of his nose. Marriage, it had never crossed his mind. Not in his previous life, nor after awakening in this one. Almost unconsciously, he looked towards Xing. At that very moment, she happened to raise her head. Their eyes met, only for an instant. Xing lowered her gaze first. Li Wei quietly looked away. Mother saw everything. A faint smile touched her lips. She said nothing more. 3 more days passed. The mountain loomed ever closer. At last, they reached the foot of Stone Ridge Mountain. Li Wei studied the steep mountain trail before speaking. We ascend at first light. Everyone nodded. Camp was quickly prepared. After supper, Li Wei sat alone beside the dying fire, gazing toward the mountain hidden beneath the night. Soft footsteps approached. Xing stopped beside him. For a time, neither spoke. The fire crackled quietly between them. At last, Xing broke the silence. I heard what Annie said. Li Wei gave a helpless smile. So you heard. She lowered her eyes. My younger brother and sister. They're all the family I have left. She paused before continuing. If young Master Li is willing, I ask only that they be given a place to live. They will work. They will earn their own keep. They will never burden your household." Li Wei looked at her. The firelight flickered across her travel-worn face. Though weary, her expression remained gentle. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "Very well." Shen Qing looked up. A trace of relief appeared in her eyes. "Then, once we reach the village, we shall speak with Auntie." Li Wei nodded once. "It shall be so." The conversation ended there. Neither spoke again. They simply watched the fire burn lower beneath the quiet mountain sky. Before dawn, everyone packed their belongings. The climb to Stone Ridge was about to begin. Before the first light of dawn spread across the eastern sky, they set out once more. The mountain path was steep. Loose stones shifted beneath every step. In many places, the trail was scarcely wide enough for a single person. Several times, Father and Li Chung steadied Mother and the younger children across narrow ledges where a single misstep would have sent them tumbling down the mountainside. The climb was slow. By the time they reached the summit, the sun had already entered the hour of shun. Li Wei stopped and looked beyond the ridge. Nestled within the valley below lay a small mountain village. Thin threads of smoke rose from earthen chimneys. Oxen returned along narrow paths between the fields. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Several children peered curiously at the strangers before hurrying behind the shelter of mud walls. Elsewhere in the village, the people remained unaware that the world beyond the mountains was already falling apart. No one spoke. After days spent among corpses and blood, the peaceful scene before them seemed almost unreal. Father let out a long breath. "We've arrived." The family continued down the mountain. Before long, they reached the village. Many villagers looked at the newcomers. Outsiders rarely came to these mountains. Father walked over to an elderly villager and cupped his fists. "Elder, may I ask where Li Shu's home is?" The old man looked at Father for a moment before nodding. "Li Shu, follow me." He led the family through the village until they stopped before a small mud brick house. The old man cupped his hands around his mouth. "Li Shu." A moment later, the wooden door opened. A middle-aged woman stepped outside. She glanced at the old man before her eyes fell upon Father. She froze. "Brother?" The old man looked between the two of them in surprise. Li Shu quickly came back to her senses. "Uncle Zhang, this is my younger brother." Her gaze swept across the others. "And his family." Understanding dawned on the old man's face. "I see." He smiled and nodded. "Then I won't disturb your family reunion." With that, he turned and left. Li Shu looked at Father again, her eyes still filled with disbelief. "Come in." She stepped aside and opened the door wider. Li Shu let everyone inside. The small home was simple but clean. A few chickens wandered freely through the yard beneath a jujube tree, while bundles of dried vegetables hung beneath the eaves. The house itself was small but clean. Li Shu's husband soon emerged from the main room. He looked over the unfamiliar faces before turning to Father. "So, you've finally come." Father nodded. "I had hoped it would be under better circumstances." Once everyone had settled, Father recounted everything that had happened since Green Willow Village fell. He spoke of the plague, of the dead who walked, of the desperate flight through the mountains, of those who had not survived the journey. The room gradually fell silent. Li Shu's husband frowned. "If what you said is true, these mountains may not remain untouched forever." He rose to his feet. "I'll invite the village head." Not long afterward, an elderly man entered the courtyard. Though advanced in years, his back remained straight. His calm gaze swept across Li Wei's family before coming to rest on Father. "I've heard your story." Father bowed respectfully before recounting everything once more. The village head listened without interruption. When Father finished, he stood in silence for a long moment. "Alas," he sighed, "heaven has shown little mercy." His gaze drifted toward the mountains beyond the courtyard wall. The discussion continued late into the evening. Since Li Shu's home could not comfortably accommodate so many people, several neighboring families offered empty rooms for the night. Only after everyone had settled did the village gradually grow quiet. Early the next morning, Li Shu led Father and the rest of the family to an abandoned house at the western edge of the village. The earthen dwelling had clearly stood empty for years. Half the wooden fence had collapsed, several roof tiles were missing, and long cracks spread across the weathered walls. Father looked around before giving a slow nod. This will do. Father soon found the village head to discuss the repairs. After some discussion, they reached an agreement. Every household that sent someone to help would receive 3 meals, 1 gene of fine white rice, and 1/3 of a gene of meat. Before long, nearly the entire village came to help. Li Shu quietly pulled Father aside. "Little brother, I don't have that much rice at home. How are you going to feed everyone?" Father smiled. The supplies were explained away as provisions the Li family had carried into the mountains. Li Shu nodded, but looked at him with doubts. Soon, the women prepared the meals while the men began repairing the house. Li Wei occasionally pointed out what should be repaired and what should be rebuilt. At his suggestion, the old fence was replaced with a taller, thicker earthen wall. The work lasted well into the following morning. By noon, the repairs were complete. After receiving their payment, the villagers gradually returned home. As the family settled into their new house, Mother looked first at Shun Qing, then at Li Wei. She set down the bundle in her hands. "The wedding should be held tomorrow." Li Wei looked up. Shun Qing froze. Father nodded. In times like these, Mother looked first at Shun Qing, then at Li Wei. She set down the bundle in her hands. "The wedding should be held tomorrow." Father nodded. In times like these, no one knows what tomorrow will bring. There is no reason to delay. The following day, the wedding was held beneath the watchful eyes of the entire village. There were no elaborate decorations, no lavish banquet, only a few red cloths, borrowed tables, simple dishes, and the heartfelt blessings of the villagers. After bowing to heaven and earth, after bowing to father and mother, Li Wei and Shun Qing bowed to one another as husband and wife. Cheers erupted throughout the courtyard. Cups of wine were raised. Laughter echoed late into the evening. One by one, the guests made their farewells and returned home. Li Wei pushed open the door to the bridal chamber. Shun Qing lowered her gaze and stepped inside. He followed after her. The wooden door slowly closed behind them. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Almost no one in Stone Ridge Village knew that beyond those mountains, the calamity continued to spread.